Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's our last Monday, so pardon us if we're just a little giddy here, knowing we don't have to come back and do this. Not that we don't love these hearings and love hearing from people, but it is a little bit of a it's a marathon. I'd like to call the Finance Ways and Means Committee to order for March 22nd, 2021. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Lamar, Lamberth, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chairman Hazelwood. Madam
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Are there any personal orders or announcements? Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And we were discussing down here and obviously on the other end too, which is why we got in trouble for talking straight into committee. But what we were discussing is we appreciate your leadership on this committee. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for leading us through the last few weeks. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much. If you're trying to make me feel bad for gaveling you down, it didn't work. But I do appreciate that. Any other personal orders or announcements? Seeing none, we have several budget hearings scheduled today. First up will be the TBI, and so, and I will remind everyone that on your dashboard, you will see the presentations. Some of them may be on the screen as well, but you do have access to them on your dashboard. So, with nobody saying nay, we're going to go out of session and proceed with our first budget hearing. So the director and your team would come forward. So Director Roush, if you would introduce yourself and your associates there, and we will let you get started.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. With me this morning is my Deputy Director, Brad Nealon, and our Director over our Fiscal Financial Services, Brian Senecal. And of course, I have several of my leadership team with us here as well. So when the hard questions come, I can reach to them to help. Thank you. Thank you to this committee. Thank you to this body for the continued support that you provide the women and men of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. It is an honor to serve each and every one of them. They continue to do amazing work for our great state. I'd like to highlight some of that work by our professional staff, from our support team to our analysts, to our scientists, to our agents. Each of them continue to perform effectively, efficiently, and professionally, regardless of the challenges. And we have had a number of challenges over this past year. Most recently, with the recovery of 150 missing children, working with the Department of Children's Services and the U.S. Marshals was an amazing piece. To the efforts during the Christmas Day bombing here in Nashville, to high-profile cases in many towns throughout our state, the jurisdictions that you represent, to closing down major drug efforts by a number of cartels. We've knocked out a cartel out of Colombia and one out of Mexico this year. And so TBI professional staff continues to respond and represent our state very well. The request we have before you, we'll start with the non-recurring funds. We have $1.3 million that we have requested for digital transformation. What that entails is a number of things. Everything from upgrading and updating our telephone system that is completely out of date, to providing equipment and upgrading our infrastructure in terms of our technology. One of the things that we do in the Bureau, we're a bit separate. While we work very closely with STS, we have a number of separate efforts that take place inside the Bureau, because we maintain the criminal justice information systems for our state. And so we need to work on those systems, and that's what this request will address. $4 million for the APHIS system. If you'll recall, last year before the pandemic, we came before you asking for $6 million, ultimately $10 million. During the pandemic, we actually worked hard and came up with a $6 million grant from the federal government to assist us in paying for this system. And so our request is for $4 million that is in other funding that will assist us to close that out and get that system where it needs to be. And so we're excited about that piece. On the recurring side, we've asked for one uniform officer, and that officer's position will be out at the new Jackson lab. As you know, each of our regional labs, we have protection, and that's what this officer will do, is protect our lab in Jackson. And then we've asked for 20 criminal investigative division agents, special agents. That request continues from last year, where we were moving forward with our request for 25. And then the pandemic hit and took out all those improvements. And so the issue still remains. We still have a need. The request is 20 because this body, at the end of last year, at the fiscal part, provided us 8 positions, 6 of which were special agents and 2 forensic positions. And so we were able to finally go forward with those positions. They were provided for us. And so this request is to take care of the 20 positions that we need to fill. And the reasoning behind that is we found ourselves, when we did the assessment on where we stand with our agents that do the criminal investigative piece. And these are the agents that are out there that answer the calls in our communities for addressing everything from homicide to rape, robbery, all of the major crimes that are occurring in those communities that don't have the resources to address those crimes. We have 48 current in the state. Of course, we have 95 counties, and so this will definitely assist us in being able to address the need throughout our state. When we did the assessment, we looked at the surrounding states. What we found was we were last out of 10 states. We were 10th in terms of the number of agents serving 100,000 population in our state. And then we also looked at violent crime, where Tennessee was in those 10 states that surround us, 9 states that surround us. We were first in violent crime. And so we certainly see the need for the agents in this budget. And then the last thing I'll hit on is our reduction. We were able to realize a $1.5 million reduction that we provided or presented. That $1.5 million came from the pandemic, basically. What we learned was we were able to do some things differently. We were able to train differently. We were able to hold meetings differently. So we didn't need to bring people to the middle of the state to hold meetings. We didn't need to have in-person training. And so we've realized that savings based on that piece. And with that, I will open up for questions as you wish, Madam Chair.
Thank you for adhering to our guidelines and sticking under 10 minutes. We appreciate that very much. We do have several people on our list. Sorry, I'm looking around. I had someone on the list who stepped out. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Director, good to see you. Hope you're doing well this morning. Just a quick question on fixed compression pay scales. With the $5 million you requested, $5.1 million to fixed compression pay scales issue, but the crest was not funded. How do the agents get pay increases under your current salary structure, and what changes would the $5.1 million have allowed you to make?
Thank you for that question. So currently, the compression issue exists because TBI was in a pay plan, and we still have that plan that we are in, that just was never funded. And so there was never the opportunity to keep the pay scales appropriately balanced and appropriately spaced. Currently, we work under the current system, and our agents get raises, our employees get raises, all employees get raises based on the state pay system, right? And I just forgot the name of it. Pay for performance. And so we currently work under the pay for performance plan. What that 5.1 would do is write the scales so that pay for performance will then just take it from there. We won't have to worry about the compression issue where we have new agents coming in that are making as much or more, quite frankly, than some of our agents that have been here a while.
Next on the list, Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Director. Again, it's good to see you and your staff here. There you are.
Thanks, Chair.
I've got just a question. According to the questionnaire that we received, your budget request, your top budget request was the restoration of 4 vacant positions that were eliminated as a part of the reduction to vacant positions required by last year's budget. The request was to restore the $195,600 along with these 4 positions. What were these 4 positions?
Thank you, Chairman. So the positions were critical positions inside of our professional team. So 2 were inside of our technical services side. So they were positions that work, again, as I mentioned, we do a lot of our own computer work and systems work. And so those 2 positions actually were critical positions, just were unfilled for a very short time, actually. And they are needed to maintain our infrastructure within the Bureau. The other 2 were within our CJIS area, the Criminal Justice Information Systems area. And again, that's an area that has seen a major increase in operations, specifically in gun sales. They have been working unbelievably hard in that area with a major increase in gun sales over the past year. And so these are individuals that actually take those calls from the gun dealers to go through and do the backgrounds and assure that a person can be approved to purchase a firearm. And so they have been overwhelmed, quite frankly. And those 2 positions, again, were taken and are needed positions as well within our agency.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair
Yes,
Lady.
thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Director, always good to see you, if I can see you here. Thank you so much for your hard work and the work of your team. I mean, it just, whether it's combating sex trafficking or some of the highest, rung drug dealers out there, or just assisting every single department in the state. And I know, I've had extensive conversations over the years with officer-involved shootings to make sure that we get to a just result and get to the bottom of every circumstance there where there's especially loss of life. We really appreciate all your hard work. So thank you for that. This question goes more with the budget presentation you originally gave to the governor's office. So in that presentation, you talked about the APHIS fingerprint system and that there was $6 million that was in the budget that was not needed because there was federal money that was put into that system. That's good usage of federal funds. Thank you for doing so. The $4 million that you've now, I think, requested as part of miscellaneous funds brings the total, though, to $10 million. What is that additional $4 million for? And would we anticipate that there would be additional expenditures down the road, or is that kind of the end of it?
Thank you, Leader. So the $4 million is all part of the complete package of completely vamping. Quite frankly, it's a complete overhaul of the APHIS system. Our system is outdated. It is in dire need of complete overhaul. And so that $4 million goes with the 6. And actually it was part of an agreement in order to get it's kind of on the edge here, but in order to get the $6 million from the federal government, we had to be able to show that we would be able to get the $4 million to complete the entire process. So that will take care of the need. There is an ongoing maintenance, but we already have that budgeted. So those funds we already have, and so we'll be able to maintain the system after that. But this is going to put the system up to where it needs to be.
Madam Chairman, if I may,
Yes, please continue.
what is that ongoing budget amount, if you don't mind?
So, yeah, I wanted to confirm it's 750,000.
750,000, and that's yearly, and you anticipate that that expenditure is going to remain relatively static at that level?
We believe so. Yes, sir.
Thank you. And again, thank you for all of your work and your team's work. And I know we'll talk probably in some of the further questions about some of your needs as far as additional agents you mentioned, and then also with the laboratory testing. I know that that's a constant battle to just stay ahead of the curve on getting results back on a variety of things that you guys test. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
And just to follow up on that APHIS question, just out of sheer ignorance on my part, do the local law enforcement agencies have access to APHIS? Do they go through you? How does that work?
Right. So thank you, Chairman. What we do is we run the system, and what they'll do is they'll request us to do fingerprint comparisons. That's what APHIS does. And so they'll send their request into us. We run the system.
So they cannot run their own. It's something that the TBI does for every law enforcement agency in the state.
That's correct.
Okay, so this is a supporting mechanism for
For
law
all
enforcement.
agencies. Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, good morning. We miss you, even after these last couple of years, we miss you and your leadership in Knoxville, but are thrilled that you're here, state agency, and thankful for the work that you do. A question related to the digital transformation you mentioned. In our committee questionnaire, you had referenced the fact that you guys had received or receiving a $500,000 grant. With that being said, have you received the $500,000 grant, and do you still need the 1.3 million, since that's the allocation 1.3 and you got that 500,000? Do you still need the full appropriation of 1.3 million?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. Yes, and I miss Knoxville as well, but I'm quite frankly enjoying my time with this great organization. Yes, so the grant actually handles a specific area that we had a need in, that we were asked in that area if we could meet, and that's dealing with internet crimes against children. And so that's what the grant addresses, is that specific area. The 1.3 is still needed because it is for more broad upgrading and updating of our systems and our equipment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Director. Again, thank you so much. I echo the comments. We appreciate your work very much. 38 pages of answers to our questionnaire. Thank you very much for that thorough response to our questionnaire that we put out. It is by far the most diverse and unique in terms of answers of where all your dollars come from. So I appreciate that. Last year's budget, we placed $4 million. We replaced $4 million out of the fee revenue structure that we had with general fund dollars. We also added an additional $4.4 million to recognize some cost increases in operations. How do 21 expenditures look so far, and have these fixes helped stabilize the budget?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Representative, yes, we actually were looking good for 21, and yes, they have helped us tremendously in order to stay positive. And so we are in great shape right now fiscally. Our team has done a great job of watching the ball very closely, and the fixes actually worked. And so we're excited. We appreciate the fix that was put in place, and it's been very effective.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Wendell.
It's my understanding that you were an MP soldier at Fort McClellan 2 or 3 decades ago. Is that correct?
That's accurate. Yes, sir.
Could you give me an assessment of the leadership skill set of one of the commanders there at the time, or Colonel Sam Whitson? Is he under oath?
Thank you, Chairman. He is an outstanding leader, and we continue to appreciate his leadership as he's here with the state.
In the June appropriations bill, $1.5 million was earmarked for your budget for the sole purpose of funding 6 additional agents. I think 4 were field agents and 2 were forensic scientists. Were you able to fill those positions?
Yeah, thank you, sir. And so it was 8 positions, 6 agents and 2 forensic scientists, and we are in the process of filling those right now. We're actually in the hiring process right now. We're at second interview, so we're close to getting that filled. And we're actually in the process of hiring 2 forensic scientists, 1 for DNA in the Knoxville lab, 1 for DNA out in the New Jackson lab.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And to follow up on that, Commissioner, or Director, so those were funded in last year's budget, but they're still not in place. Was the COVID situation, did that delay the process, or can you tell us why those positions weren't filled more quickly?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So they actually we were told to use our equity to fund those, and then all equity was frozen. And so until the equity was released, we could not hire those positions.
Okay. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you and everything TBI has done for the state. Earlier in the pandemic, in the Memphis Forensic Science Services Division, we were experiencing a backlog and, people getting a chance to bury their loved ones. It was multiple reasons, toxicology reports, and we were getting called from people, can you help? What do we need to do? Can you talk about, where we are now with that, and maybe hiring two additional positions will help into this end. Could you give us an update on that and what's going on with the Memphis?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. So we have actually, as a result of the pandemic, one of the things that has happened is we have seen a decrease in the amount of evidence we have in backlog, and so we had 21,000 pieces of evidence that was needing to be processed when the pandemic started. We're at 11,000 now. Now the reason for that is obviously courts have been closed. And so our scientists have been able to stay on the bench and do their work and assess and evaluate and make their reports. And so they've been able to work all of this evidence during the pandemic. The challenge, obviously, is when courts open back up, then we will find ourselves with the same issue we were having prior to this. And so we're working on some solutions with the courts. We're hoping that the potential and possibility of virtual testimony in some cases will allow us to keep agents, the agents on the bench, our scientists working evidence rather than having to wait in court to testify, and they may or may not testify. So it takes them out of the office for a whole day, whether they testify or not. And even if they're on standby, they're unable to start new evidence just in case they get called and they have to leave. And so that processing gets impacted. And so we're working on those solutions with the administrative offices of courts, with the DA's office, with the public defenders. We're hoping that everyone will come to an agreement that there is appropriate time where virtual testimony can be done. And we think that'll help in terms of our turnaround time. We still will handle requests. And so if somebody requests that a piece of evidence gets worked quicker, we do that. Now, every time we do that, of course, that pushes other evidence behind. And so, but when we get those requests from DAs, from chiefs, from sheriffs, throughout the state judges, and so we'll do that. We'll put it in front of the line and we'll work it. But again, it pushes the other evidence back when we do that.
Thank you. Also, a few years back, the TBI did a wonderful report on human trafficking and what was happening in the state. And I think we was recognized nationally for the work that we were doing. And there was a lot of conversation around training law enforcement on how to identify human trafficking, different than, prostitution, and just, what are some of the elements of human trafficking. And so could you give us an update on where we are with that, how we looking? I mean, did we, any report or update you can give us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Representative. So we continue as a state to lead in terms of human trafficking and the investigative process, as well as the services that are provided to trafficking victims. The state still maintains the top spot in the country in our efforts on human trafficking, and so we continue that. There's a great working team that works very closely with us. Representatives from this body work with us on that council, and we continue to thrive in that arena. And our team has been training, and they've been teaching, and we've been working. The biggest thing is basically we've gone with the mission and the concept of teaching our local agencies how to fish. And so helping them understand how to do these operations, where we don't have to, bring all of our agents in to run the operations. We now work very closely with our local agencies to do that. We have a grant that we're working right now that has helped us create task forces throughout the state. So we have task force agents from local law enforcement that work closely with us on human trafficking. And so it's a comprehensive effort that continues to reap benefits for our state.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
And I'll just add to that, I know an effort that I believe began in Chattanooga, actually, with a group there that's really paid dividends, not only training law enforcement, but working with hotels and other places where that sort of activity occurs, and helping the people who work in those facilities to understand and look for the signs and know when there's an issue that should be reported. And it's a horrible problem to have, but I'm glad that we are I won't say we're on top of it, but we're certainly, I think, making strides in our state that are above and beyond what other states are doing. And there are a lot of people to thank for that, from volunteers on the ground to law enforcement and you guys. So I do appreciate that. Next on my list is Representative Lynn. All right. To go back to the rape kits, and could you just help us put a number? I know we've had a backlog. Leader Camper alluded to that in her questioning, but can you just help us put a number on where we are and when we might actually be caught up? And I know that's dependent on the number of forensic scientists, and I'll do another piece of that question. I believe I remember you telling me at one point that once these folks were hired, the forensic scientists, it was something like 16 months to 2 years before they were actually effective, could work on their own. So it's a long-term process. But can you just give us some indication of how that problem is hopefully dwindling and when it might be? I know it's never going to be immediate, but when it might be more current.
Thank you, Chairman. So a couple of things, and then I'll call my assistant director in charge of our forensics, Mike Little, up to get into more detail with you. But we in specific terms of the rape kit issue, it is in terms of the addressing it. We have just about finished those backlog rape kits. Now, keep in mind that they continue to come in. And so they continue to have to be worked. And so, and we continue to look for additional resources to assist us with that. We've sent a lot of these out to private labs to be worked, but even those that get sent out, they come back and a scientist has to review them. And so that takes time. And so I know Mike can give you more detail in terms of where we are specifically with that.
And if you just state your name and position for the record. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's better.
Yeah.
I'm Mike Little. I'm Assistant Director of the Forensic Services Division for TBI. When we're talking about rape kits, I guess there's a couple of different ways that we need to categorize them. In terms of unsubmitted rape kits that have been sitting on a shelf somewhere, I'm not aware of any of those left in Tennessee that we're processing. Going back to 2006, we had as many as 12,000 and change from Memphis, as well as another couple of thousand across the state. Those have all been processed either at the TBI lab or at outsourced labs. As the director mentioned, in order to search those in the CODIS system, they have to be technically reviewed by a scientist at TBI, whether they're worked at a private lab or not. That was a huge undertaking for us, and we are now, I'm happy to say that is behind us. And I have no indications that there are any backlog sexual assault kits in Tennessee to be worked. Now that brings us to current sexual assault cases. We were probably a year ago around 30 to 35 weeks turnaround time on sexual assault cases. We cut that down to about 15 weeks at the peak of the pandemic. That's crept back up to about 22, 23 weeks right now. That is something that we are working on in a number of mechanisms. Obviously, getting more forensic scientists is going to be the key to getting that done. And as you stated earlier, the training period for a forensic scientist to do DNA testing is about 18 months. So that is something that we are working on. Again, as the director has mentioned, not having to go to court during the pandemic has been huge for us. And I don't know what implications there may be for virtual testimony for rape cases. Those are some tougher cases. But across the division, we spend a lot of time in court and we spend a lot of time waiting to go to court. Frequently, the DAs will do us a favor by putting us on call, which is great. But the problem with that is that when I'm put on call, I really can't do anything in the lab. So it's really limited our ability to work complicated evidence. All of that being said, we have dramatically cut our turnaround time on sexual assault cases. It's something we are very aware of and we hope to continue to improve upon.
Well, thank you for the work done in that area. I know it was a heavy lift because of the backlog and sadly it is an ongoing issue. It's we're never gonna, you're always gonna get another one.
That is true.
But thank you for making that a priority. I think it's pretty important to a number of us on this committee that we can continue to address that. And as you say, once courts begin again, then there's a real opportunity that 22 weeks moves further out. So I'm hoping with your additional forensic scientists and perhaps the courts working with you on virtual testimony that we'll be able to make that at least not get it any worse and hopefully in time bring that down, because a lot of things can happen in 22 weeks if we have a serial rapist or whatever out there working. So thank you for that. Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we've got a few other questions, but since we seem to have a little bit of time, I do want to remind and maybe inform some of our newer members that the origination of the TBI, and this was expressed to me by Chairman Faison, reminded me, Chairman Faison, that the TBI had its origination with a murder case in Greene County. The publisher of the newspaper was very frustrated. Law enforcement was extremely frustrated back in the day, and great minds got together and formulated a set of state investigators that came in and worked the crime in Greene County. So it was certainly some shared energy and resources to work that crime. So, and I think that the facility here in Middle Tennessee has an honoring plaque in the name of John M. Jones Jr., who is just passed away fairly recently at the ripe old age of 101 within the last decade. And that's a great gentleman helping to organize the organization that we have right now. So thank you for my trip down the memory lane, Madam Chair.
And Leader Lambert, I am so sorry. I believe you had a follow-up question to my line of questioning. So I apologize for not getting to you at the appropriate time.
Madam Chairman, it actually was on a different topic, same witness though. So thank you, Madam Chairman. But Mike, I just want to say it's very good to see you. For those that don't know Mike Little, I mean, when I was a young assistant district attorney, anytime I ever had a question about anything dealing with the lab or forensics or anything else, Mike was my first call. I deeply, deeply appreciate you always taking those calls, and now as a legislator taking them as well. But there's not a prosecutor in this state or attorney that can't trust this lab to do the work so well that it's rare even that a defense attorney bothers to get an outside opinion. And that's because they shoot it straight right down the middle. And I appreciate the fact, I've always appreciated that. But I can't tell you how many times when I was a prosecutor that I would be dealing with attorneys that were defending clients. And when they got the results from the lab at the TBI, they took it as the absolute gospel. So thank y'all for taking your time on that. Thank you for doing the job you do. And again, I just appreciate your friendship and wanted to recognize you in the committee because we go back a long way. And I've watched you kind of rise through the ranks over there. And I just really appreciate your work, man. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. And maybe to follow up on one comment, and the director touched on this, Not all cases for us are the same. So if we have a serial rapist or if we have comments from a district attorney, as often Leader Lambeth would call me, we move those cases to the front of the line. The Nashville bombing case is maybe the most extreme example. We had DNA results on that the same day. So we are very reactive to what kind of case is going on. Unfortunately, when we do react to one case, that pushes another case to the back. So, I'm strictly dealing in averages when I talk to you.
Well, Madam Chairman, on that note, Mike, I wasn't going to bring it up, but yeah, thank you for always doing that as well, because there are cases where time is of the essence. I mean, I remember a vehicular homicide case very vividly that I called you where we had someone that had been killed by a young lady that was intoxicated on alcohol and marijuana, and it was in the early morning hours. And I called you, and we literally had results within about 24 hours, and we needed it desperately in that case to be able to go forward. I know that's not the norm. I know that bumps other cases back, but it is important to know, I think, for the committee, that you guys are able to be nimble in those situations where it isn't like it's just coming in the door and everything gets in line. Some cases have to be put at the front. So again, thank y'all for doing that.
Thank you. You're welcome. Yes, thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Director, and all of you for being here. And certainly, it's been said once, need to be said again, that we are very proud of your leadership in law enforcement across our state. Over the years, I've sat on this committee, and I know years back you were pretty short of field agents. Have you been able to catch up, or kind of where are we right now on field agents in terms of covering our state?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. So the request before you will be what will help us to get where we need to be. So what we've done since I walked in the door in 2018 is take a hard look at where we are and where we need to be. I'm not going to bring before you Band-Aids. I'm bringing fixes, and I'm not bringing a fix that takes care of it today. I'm bringing a fix that will take care of it today and hopefully for the next 5 years, maybe forward. But that's what we're bringing to you. That's when we said we need 20 agents that are 25 originally, and now we're at 20 because of the 6 that you gave us. This is going to take care of us for a little while. So we're excited about this fix. We think this will handle that. We will come before you again. A lot's been discussed about forensics. We'll be coming before you next year with a forensics request. We're working very closely right now, gathering all the data, gathering the evidence. Everything we bring to you is based on evidence. It's not what we think or what we feel. This is based solely on scientific fact that we look at. We compare ourselves to other entities like us and try to determine where we stand in those entities. With the agents, for example, when we asked for the number we asked for, it's not going to put us at number 1 out of the 10. It's going to put us number 7. But we feel like 7 is going to be okay for us. And that it'll help us to deal with the level and the volume of cases that come into the TBI.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. The Jackson office, I know we're looking forward to a grand opening real soon. Can you just briefly talk a little bit about what position that put you in terms of services across our state once we get that office open?
Absolutely. I'll touch on some of it, and I know Mike, again, can tell you specific in terms of the services that the lab itself will provide. But what it does is it centralizes the effort in West Tennessee. We've had the office in Memphis for quite some time. And obviously Memphis is one of the biggest utilizers. Shelby County, Memphis is a big utilizer. But there are a number of other agencies in West Tennessee that we support. And so being in Jackson, it does a few things. One is it centralizes the location for all of law enforcement in the west side of the state. But it additionally gives us the space that we need to be able to perform and to provide the services that we know West Tennessee needs. And so that's another huge advantage of the Jackson office. Mike, you want to talk about specific?
Yeah, and just to reiterate what the director said, if you guys recall back to 2003, we used to have a lab in Jackson and we built a lab in Memphis. The Memphis lab was never designed to be the lab for West Tennessee. It didn't have the capacity to serve all of West Tennessee. So the Jackson lab will fill that gap. We will now have a lab that's capable of servicing all of West Tennessee. We're going to have all of the same division, all of the same units in the Jackson lab that we have in the Memphis lab with a greater capacity to do testing. We've also added a CODIS unit. That is something that has not been staffed yet, and we're hoping to ask for positions for that next year, I think. But what that will do for us is allow us to do the CODIS testing on the arrestees and the convicted offenders to get those into the system as quickly as possible so that we can get matches. You'll probably hear the term legally owed DNA coming up in the not too distant future. That is something that we're working on, and on the heels of the sexual assault kit crisis. What we're now finding is that everybody that should have been put in the CODIS database was not put in the CODIS database. So there's going to be a great emphasis on not only getting sexual assault kits shored up, but making sure that those people who should be there to compare to are there as well.
If I could, Mike mentioned legally owed, Chairman, and I just want to make sure that you understand. We are actually already working on that issue. We have a grant over $1 million that we got from the federal government to work on that issue already. So we're jumping way ahead of the curve on that one to try to figure out what the level of the problem is, because we don't know yet.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you. Thank you, Director, for those requests for those new agents. I want to thank you and your staff and DA and local law enforcement. Y'all recently had a raid. I think it was a seizure of over 1,000 fentanyl-laced pills. And one reason you need those agents is 2 weeks ago, my wife had called me and asked me to, a mother had called her and said that her daughter had overdosed. They found her dead in a ditch in Wilson County. And I gave her a ride to Vanderbilt, sat there for about 5 hours, and they had to take her off life support next morning. So this stuff starts hitting your community. You feel the pain. You see the pain in a mother's eyes like that, and you see the tears. And I know y'all have seen them. And want to thank you. And you know, I think each and every one of us up here realize the importance of what you do and the seriousness of this border crisis, you know, which I'm sure y'all are concerned with. Hopefully something will be enforced, but I just want to thank y'all for the work you do, and DEA and our local detectives as well. Thank you.
Right, Director, before we let you go, you had mentioned in your presentation that we were number 10 in per capita of agents, but number 1 in violent crime, which I don't think and that is in 10 states, I'm assuming 10 southeastern states.
Yes.
I don't know that any of us ever, you know, our goal has ever been to be number 1 in violent crime. So could you speak to, other than your law enforcement or personnel numbers, the other things that might be contributing to that and what we're doing to, other than adding agents to address that issue?
Absolutely. So, you know, obviously the country is seeing an increase in violent crime, and the Southeast seems to lead the way, unfortunately. So when we look at the states that surround Tennessee, we see the issue. We see it in full color. Unfortunately, Tennessee is leading in those in this region in terms of our violent crime. It has a number of reasons for why it exists, and so you know it's hard to put a single answer to why we have violent crime leading the way in Tennessee, other than we just have the issues that have come from everything from I think divisiveness that exists. I think we see issues with drugs. Obviously, that we have a large influx of narcotics coming into our state. Methamphetamine is leading the way in Tennessee now, which has you know, there's always been other, you know, marijuana was always the number 1 drug. It's now methamphetamine. Methamphetamine scares me because of the way people who are on that drug respond, and they are very violent, and so that's a factor involved in it. I think you know, economics is another issue. While the state's doing extremely well, I think we still have pockets of poverty that need to be addressed, that are out there, and that's an area where we could see more improvement in the state. And then, you know, in terms of you know, holding people accountable, I think the state does a fair job. I think we can do better at holding individuals accountable that commit violent crime. And so I think we got to focus more on that area, and you know, in terms of the efforts that we're putting in. Our law enforcement agencies throughout the state are working tirelessly to address these issues. We're seeing them all throughout the state. As I said, homicide is up. Homicide with firearms is up tremendously right now. So for the past quarter, we've seen increases of anywhere from 50 to 80% in terms of homicide with a firearm in our state. And so, it's just, it appears, and this, again, it's not, I don't think it's unique to Tennessee. It appears that conflict seems to be prevalent. And, where conflict in, I look at this group, you all are seasoned as I am. And, conflict in our days, we handled it differently. Unfortunately, conflict today is handled with firearms. And that's where we're at, unfortunately. And so that increases the amount of violent crime that we're seeing. And so I think there's a number of factors, right? And there are things that can be done, obviously. There are efforts that can be in place. And I think that's where we're trying to address all of these efforts in coordinated responses. Federal, local, and state have been all working together to try to get control. I was over in Knoxville visiting, but they've seen an increase in youth getting killed in Knoxville, and so I was over there working with our federal and our local folks, and a lot of the conversations there have revolved around addressing these gangs. The gangs are different today. Again, another feel. The gangs are different than what they were in the past. They're not the Bloods and the Crips and the organized, structured gangs that we've seen. What we're seeing is neighborhood gangs. We're seeing individuals who step up and say, "I'm going to be the guy," and they're violent, and it's different. The structure isn't there where law enforcement was really good at working at the structure of gangs. This unstructured gang atmosphere has given us a bit of a curve, and so we're trying to figure out how to cut that off with this new way that we're seeing, because it's not as structured. Structured gangs we can go at pretty easily to cut that structure out. These unstructured gangs are a little more difficult.
Thank you for a sobering response. Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. From watching the TV news, you really wouldn't realize that so much of this has taken place. They just seem to report a lot of fluff. These statistics must be gathered into a report somewhere, somehow. Would you all mind sending that to our chairman? And chairman, if you would send that to the rest of the committee, because really as policymakers, if we can, if we don't understand that there's how the magnitude of the problem and from where it originates, and were those guns legal? Were they not legal? Was the person a handgun carry permit holder? Were they not a handgun carry permit holder? How old are they? How we need to understand those things. So if you wouldn't mind sending a report, whatever information, I'm not asking you to generate one, just whatever information you get, send that to our chairman, and if she would send that to the rest of us so that we can review it. Thank you.
Yes, Representative. We actually get we do a weekly report, and then monthly, obviously. So during the pandemic, we started to get local agencies started reporting weekly their data to us, and so that we could kind of stay focused on what's happening. And then we put a monthly report out. We can certainly share that.
Thank you, and our office will distribute it. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Director, one of the things that has frustrated me for years when we're looking at violent crime in the state of Tennessee, and particularly in Memphis, Shelby County, they always use the metropolitan statistical data, which for us in Memphis takes in 7 surrounding counties and attribute that to Memphis. So it appears we're number one. But then when you back out DeSoto County, Crittenden County, Tate County, Marshall County, Tipton County, and just have Memphis proper, you go from being what is perceived as number one to maybe 15 or 17. And so I think it's a misnomer sometimes when we're talking about violent crime in Memphis Shelby County, and I'm wondering now, you're saying Tennessee being number one, is this statistical data also included in that for Tennessee? And this could be a problem with other border cities for Tennessee because we touch 8. So our data is including the surrounding counties, which I think is unfair for us to characterize and then use that data to drive policy, funding, A, B, C, D. So can you talk to that issue and whether that is true in the report that you're talking about, putting us at the top of the list in the Southeast?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. So our data is based solely on reported crime in Tennessee, in terms of where Tennessee's numbers are. Tennessee is a incident-based reporting state. Now, starting this next year, every state in the union will be incident-based reporting. The FBI has required that, and so everybody will be reporting the same way. It's still a voluntary system,
Yeah.
and so everybody who volunteers to submit their data will submit it the same way. And so that is something we have to look at when we're looking at it. But most of the states that touch Tennessee are incident-based already as well. And so it is comparing the proper numbers. Now, when you talk about the statistical data for Memphis, when we do the stats, we do it based on the city and the county. So our stats that we put out annually will show specifically for each of those areas. Now, we also caution not to use those statistics as comparative. You have to be careful because different areas are different, right? So, your urban centers are different than your rural centers. And so, comparison, you have to be careful making sure that when you're doing those comparisons, you're looking at like types of areas. As you know, statistics are difficult just because they are what they are. But the numbers do tell us there are issues. And we know that, we see that, we work those cases. When we're looking at comparing ourselves to a GBI, for example, the TBI to GBI, we're looking very closely at total number of cases worked. We're looking, those types of things because they work the same kind of cases we work. And so those comparisons are very, very tight. But I hear your concern about the stats. We have those same concerns when we're looking at it as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, Director, as always, we appreciate your presence here today and taking the time to answer our questions, both and as I think Chairman Hawk alluded to, a very detailed answer to the questions that we provided ahead of time and then to answer our questions today. But most of all, we appreciate the work that you and your team do across the state to help address violence and all of the other issues that crime brings to bear. So thank you for your good work, and we hope to hear next year that you were able to hire these forensic scientists and these agents and that we're making a dent and we could move down to 2 or 3 or 5 or 10. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Chairman. We appreciate you and the committee.
We're going to take a few moments for the sanitation process, and then we will be welcoming our friends from TDEC. Right. Welcome to the Department of Environment and Conservation. Commissioner, we thank you for being here with us today. And as we have asked all of our presenters, if your presentation will hopefully be around 10 minutes, and then that will give us adequate time to ask whatever questions may be on committee members' minds. So with that, I'll quit cutting into your time and ask you to proceed.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair Hazelwood, Vice Chairman Baum, I'm sorry, and members of the committee. My name is David Salyers, and I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Environment and Conservation. Here with me today are Jim Bryson, Deputy Commissioner of Parks and Conservation. On the far end over there, Greg Young, Deputy Commissioner, Bureau of Environment, and Scott Grammer, our Budget Director. We're also joined by several members of our senior leadership team, including Chief of Staff Karen Simo and General Counsel Jenny Howard. But first, let me begin with just a personal note of gratitude for the opportunity to serve this state's and our citizens as Commissioner of this department, and but never more than coming through the last year. But not only were we able to meet TDEC's mission last year, our staff and programs delivered during a time of record-setting workload and with no reduction in service. In fact, this is one that I really like to brag on, is our subsurface septic program saw a nearly 50% increase in permitting, and we still reduced the time required to issue permits. And our state parks were a haven for our citizens. We saw increased visitation and set records in camping and cabin activity. State parks saw 4 of its highest months ever in overnight camping volumes, and we broke every monthly record for cabin occupancy in 2020. Other records we set during 2020 were the investments TDEC deployed in our communities, and many of you joined us to celebrate some of the record investments in Tennessee state parks. Over the past year, we had more than $180 million in facilities construction underway or completed. In 2020, Representative Curcio and Representative Littleton joined us to cut the ribbon on our renovated lodge in Montgomery Bell in Dixon County. And we were excited to have Representative Gant help us celebrate the ribbon cutting at our beautifully renovated lodge at Pickwick Landing in Hardin County. Representative Williams and Representative Wendell were there when we opened the terrific new visitor center at Cummins Falls in Jackson County. Speaker Sexton was present when we celebrated the new visitor center at Fall Creek Falls in Van Buren County. Most recently, Representative Grills and Representative Darby joined TDOT Commissioner Clay Bright and myself when we cut the ribbon for the new Great River Road Visitor Center at Reelfoot Lake in Lake County. And as exciting and interesting as 2020 was, we have a greater anticipation for 2021. Governor Lee joined us earlier this year when we broke ground for a new restaurant visitor center at Henry Horton in Marshall County. We also made significant progress on new lodges for Paris Landing and Fall Creek Falls. We have great anticipation about opening both of these showcase facilities this fall and welcoming guests from across the state and around the nation. Each of these major projects reflects a serious commitment from across administrations and across general assemblies to Tennessee state parks and the communities that we serve. And now I'd like to ask our deputy commissioners to share a little bit, and we'll start with Deputy Commissioner Young on the Bureau of Environment.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, committee members, for allowing us to appear today. My name is Greg Young. I am the Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Environment. And right out of the gate, I do want to let y'all know that we do think it's very important at TDEC from the Commissioner down that the Bureau of Environment be as much of a resource as it is a regulator for the General Assembly and for the public. So with that being said, I'll talk a little bit about what we were able to accomplish in 2020. I'm pleased to note that in 2020, our state revolving fund marked a record investment in our communities by issuing more than $187 million in ultra low or no interest loans for 21 different water and wastewater projects. Our petroleum underground storage tank program continues to be ranked by EPA as a model for the nation. The overall effectiveness of our program, from protection at the pump to the efficiency of our UST cleanups, has made it possible for TDEC to pursue rule development this year that will result in approximately $10 million in reduced fees paid by the regulated community. That's a big accomplishment for us in a year of economic uncertainty. We have also been working closely with EPA and local officials on the brownfield cleanup of Chattanooga's South Side. This careful restoration effort has been a model of coordination between federal, state, and local agencies and reflects the tremendous importance and potential of brownfield cleanups across the state of Tennessee. And I'll leave you today with another personal thought. In addition to being as much a resource as a regulator, I think some of the best environmental protection comes when people actually have an opportunity to get out and use and enjoy the resource. And so with those thoughts, I do want to kick it over to Deputy Commissioner Jim Bryson right now.
Thank you, Greg, and it's good to be here with you and good to have an opportunity today to represent the very best state park system in the entire nation. And we are very proud of all of that, of what our state parks do every day. State parks are an incredible investment for this state. You may not realize it, but back in this year, we commissioned the University of Tennessee to do an economic impact study to understand exactly what kind of impact state parks has. State parks has an impact in Tennessee in 2020 of $1.84 billion in economic activity. That is a huge impact and makes it a great investment. The other piece that makes this a great investment for the state is that we generated in state parks, and the visitors that come generated $110 million in direct sales tax revenue back to the state of Tennessee. That is twice our $55 million in appropriations. So Tennessee state parks are an excellent investment. Also, Tennessee state parks generated $22 million in local sales tax revenue, much of that in our most distressed counties, rural areas. So state parks are a great investment for the state and our local communities and counties. So we're very, very excited about that. State parks will pay off now in the fact that our residents this past year have been able to go out into our parks and get away from a lot of the stress that they've been under this past year. Never have state parks been more valuable than they were in this past year. So they're a great investment for our residents, but they're also a great investment for the state of Tennessee. And that investment will pay off now and in years to come. There's much more that we can talk about, but we'll get on to the budget. And so I'll throw it back to Commissioner Salyers.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Let me just share some of the highlights from our proposed fiscal year 22 budget. Our base budget request for FY22 is $417.9 million and is inclusive of all our revenue sources. And the majority of our revenues come from fees, settlements, or federal grants. We request $106.9 million in general fund appropriations, which is approximately a quarter of our base budget. $122 million, or approximately 30% of the department's budget, goes to parks and conservation activities. State parks also collects approximately $35 million in revenue annually to support their budget. $257 million, or approximately 64% of the budget, goes for environmental activities. $23 million, or approximately 6% of our budget, goes for department-wide support services such as legal, HR, IT, and procurement that support our two main bureaus. Over the past year, we engaged in a thorough review of all department operations to identify where efficiencies and reductions could be realized. In FY22, TDEC met its target for the vacant position reduction process by identifying 61 long-term vacancies, resulting in a savings of over $1 million. And for FY22, we propose a budget reduction plan that will result in savings of over $3.2 million of general fund appropriations. Department reductions were accomplished through reducing additional vacant positions, finding operational efficiencies through state park job share conversions, and utilizing alternative revenue sources to offset the impact to the state's general fund. Looking forward, our top priority for FY22 is $15 million for modernization of TDEC's core IT systems. And this request is a direct response to issues identified in the 2018 Comptroller's Performance Audit Report that cited specific needs to centralize our data repositories, improve data management, and increase data availability. And in addition to these findings, the current state of TDEX technology systems results in loss of revenue from fee collections, inefficient use of staff to manually handle data, and limitations on the online services and information we can provide to our stakeholders and our customers. Our second priority is a major investment to address the deferred maintenance backlog in our state parks. This request is for $30 million. And when combined with the $10 million that we received last year, it's going to allow state parks to address one half its total deferred maintenance projects that have been identified as high priority. And that's going to save millions in future maintenance. All the deferred maintenance projects will be less than $100,000 and will include a wide variety of items. For example, last year we completed roof replacements on cabins at Standing Stone State Park in Overton County. And these new roofs have improved the look and functionality of those facilities at this beautiful state park. Another successful deferred maintenance project addressed significant dock repairs at Booker T. Washington State Park. We replaced all the decking and handrails to ensure guest safety. And I'm pleased to report that our state parks facilities and maintenance team has demonstrated a great ability to stretch the deferred maintenance funds. Currently, we're running at a 118% efficiency rate, and that means we're completing more than 18% more projects with the money that you gave us than we anticipated. So that's a really good thing. We do have two supplemental requests for FY21, and the first is $2.6 million for the state contribution to our state revolving loan fund program. Under the 80-20 federal state match, this $2.6 million will pull down an additional $13 million of federal dollars to help address the significant water and wastewater needs that we need to meet here in Tennessee. And leveraging these state dollars to address our water infrastructure needs is one of the most meaningful and powerful ways we can strengthen communities of all sizes across the state of Tennessee. The second is a $1.27 million request for modernizing state park hospitality operations. The General Assembly has invested over $100 million in park lodges to upgrade them, and the results have been very, very impressive. If you've not been out to see them, please get out soon. But this supplemental request does allow us to modernize our staffing structure so we can provide the service, and as Jim likes to refer to them as the wow moments that Tennesseans expect and deserve when they visit our facilities. This appropriation covers the needs for the current fiscal year, and a separate recurring request will occur for fiscal year 22. So since we've covered our top priorities, I will very quickly run through the other items. Our third item on the chart is to address the modernization of state parks hospitality for fiscal year 22, which is a recurring amount. The fourth item is a response to federally mandated salary updates. Our park system has 5 parks on leased federal land, excluding TVA property. So as we renew those leases, we need to make those upgrades. The fifth item is a new position to staff the new visitor center at Cummins Falls State Park. That's very important that we have this person in there for safety, and since we issue permits for people to enter the gorge. The sixth item is for GIS licensing, supporting state parks activities. As you can imagine, technology is becoming more and more vital and a key part of managing 56 state parks in every corner of the state. And the last item is the state funding required to implement the surface mining permitting program. A few years ago, the General Assembly directed the transfer of the Federal Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act permitting and oversight to TDEC from the U.S. Department of Interior's Office of Sustainable Mining. Even when drawing down the federal money that has been made available for a state-operated program, we'll still need to spend $871,000 a year to run the surface mining program. In our last slide, I like to show it reflects TDEC's portion of the overall state appropriations over the last 9 years. In FY22, TDEC state appropriation represents approximately 1.19% of Tennessee's total state appropriations. I would note this represents a decrease of more than 15% over the past decade, and down from 1.45% to 1.18% of total state appropriations. And this shows as a percentage of the overall general fund. And support for TDEC activity has been restrained, but at the same time, our workload, our permits issued, our inspections conducted, and park visitors served has increased. So we believe that this reflects the overall efficiency and effectiveness of our department, and that we've been good stewards of the resources that you've provided to us to serve our citizens. So thank you so much for the support of our department and our mission in providing resources to our staff to serve the people of Tennessee at a high level. Turn it back over to you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Sawyers, and thank you also to your deputies for your good hard work on our parks and your conservation efforts. We really appreciate all that you do. We've got a list of questions, and I want to get us started off by going back to a few items that you just mentioned. One of them was the improvements to your IT system, the system that collects fees and provides data regarding customers. You had originally requested $5 million and were awarded $15 million in the proposed budget. I guess my first question is, what additional improvements to that IT system can be made with that additional money?
Well, our anticipation was in the prior year's budget, we did request $15 million in non-recurring for that, and that was to carry out this 3-year project. So that's what we were looking at, and so we asked for 5. That was going to get us through the 1 year, and so we went back and we got the 3 years, and I think it's a good commitment toward getting that system in place.
So does this mean that the $15 million will fully cover the cost of this project, the upgrades?
That is pretty close. It could be 14 and it could be 20. So it is, as we get into the systems with strategic technology solutions, we're working toward that. But we think it's pretty close. Yes, sir.
Okay, and then maybe one more question related to that. Will there be any change in the maintenance costs for this system as we, for the improved system as we move forward?
We would certainly anticipate that. Yes, sir.
Okay, any idea how much?
I know we researched those numbers in details, and I do not have those really handy right now. We think there's a number of other efficiency gains there as well, with respect to staffing and things, because we have a lot of senior level staff that currently have to handle data and invoices that should be handled by the system going forward. So through attrition, we may need fewer people, but it is very significant. Yes.
Okay. And then I've got a few questions related to kind of another item that you just mentioned. It has to do with, I guess, wages paid to employees. Recently, a federal executive order mandated a minimum wage of $10.60 for individuals working under certain federal contracts. And this affects your department because Tennessee State Parks leases federal lands. In last year's budget, I believe we allocated $1.3 million for these increases. You have requested an additional, let's say, $470,000. Is that additional amount tied to these federally mandated minimum wages for certain employees?
The short answer is yes. That's exactly what they are. My understanding is the federal minimum wage has been bumped a couple of times, and so we've had to come back and ask for those increases. So that's exactly what it is.
And I guess I'm curious, does this cover all of your employees, or is it just those subset of workers that are involved with, I guess, the lands that are leased from the federal government?
So it only involves the employee classifications that are on the lands that are leased by the federal government. So those classifications have gotten an increase, and though it is an extra expenditure, I think for the positive side of that is these are some of our lowest paid employees who often are really struggling to get by. So though it is an increased expenditure, I think it's something that is well appreciated by our employees. And I just want to say to all of you all, thank you for the opportunity to be able to do this.
And could you give me a rough estimate of how many employees this would cover?
Mr. Vice Chairman, I don't know at this point.
I'm pretty sure it's 800.
800?
Approximately 800 employees.
About 800. And are they now going to be getting exactly $10.60 an hour, or is there a little variance even with these adjustments?
I'm pretty sure there will be some variance, but I can check on that for you, but it's going to be bringing them up to, if they're below the federal minimum wage, it'll be bringing them up to that minimum wage. I wouldn't want to say in front of you here that there's not going to be any variance, but that's what the intention is.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for that information. Next on our list is Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Great job. The Commissioner, Deputy Commissioners, thanks for coming. I had a couple of questions as related, and I saw you in the hall the other day about this, but the real estate transfer tax, the land acquisition fund, there's about $20 million in that fund right now. I guess the question is, what is the anticipation of these funds? Do you anticipate purchasing any property with those funds, with that $20 million, or where are we?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Representative Williams. So we are anticipating purchasing some property with that. Our number one priority, we have money, we have a portion of those funds actually set aside to complete the Cumberland Trail, which is an initiative that this legislature set up, well, I don't know, 30 years ago to try to get done. So we're working very hard to try to get that completed. And so there is a significant part of that money that is set aside for that. After that, with our state parks and natural areas, our primary our priorities are going to be either what we call in holdings, which are lands that we don't own that are surrounded by our park or natural area that people want to sell. We want to be able to acquire that and make it easier for us to manage that, and also make it available to people who come to visit. And then significant, not every tract, but significant tracts that are adjacent to our lands that will help us to protect the borders and protect some of those significant areas. So those, excuse me, those are some of the priorities for those monies that we have. And then there's and that's the way that we're going forward.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Also, you mentioned, Commissioner, earlier, $10 million we spent last year at 118% utilization, sounds like, of maintenance money. In your budget request earlier in the year, though, you asked for $26 million of maintenance money, and yet you got funded $30 million, which that doesn't happen very often. You must be a very good arm twister.
No arm twisting, sir.
Yeah, I guess the question is what was the $4 million difference? Was there a specific project, or were you just trying to do more than we originally anticipated?
Trying to do more. It's certainly Deputy Commissioner Bryson and my objective to eliminate all the deferred maintenance by the time we're out of these seats, and then have a structurally balanced maintenance fund going forward, so we don't get into this situation where we're 82 million in the hole in deferred maintenance.
Well, I appreciate that. I know that many of my colleagues had an opportunity to visit Burgess Falls not too long ago, and we saw some maintenance problems that were there as well. And I'm glad to see that some of that's going to be taken care of in this process. But for your other Deputy Commissioner, I just had one question, just personally related, because it's part of my full-time, part-time job, and that is, how long is it taking right now to get an MPDS permit from the state?
So there are multiple kinds of NPDS permits. If are you talking about
typical NOI permit, or
so you're talking about construction, stormwater?
Yeah.
So we are currently, actually, we've got one matter that we're looking at that has taken a little bit longer. But in general, we're meeting the timeframe set forth in the Permittees Bill of Rights there. I think it's 30 days or 60 days. We've got one matter that came up around Clarksville, but we've been addressing those. We feel like we're doing pretty good right now on the timeframes.
I would attest that you are doing pretty good. When I first got here, though, it was more like 120, 130 days. And so that Bill of Rights was a big deal back
Yes,
when
sir.
we did it, and it is 30 days. And so I just wanted to say that to encourage you and your team to continue to do the good work that you are. Thank you.
If I could add to that on behalf of the Deputy Commissioner, that is a big objective of ours is, hey, the laws are the law, the rules are the rules. We need quality air, land, and water, but where we can be effective is really trying to reduce that process time. So that's a huge priority of ours, and we're going to continue to beat on that.
Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Commissioner and team. Big fans of what y'all have done for the folks of Tennessee. Some of the best times I've ever spent was with my grandkids at Radnor and Standing Stone and Pickett State Parks. Also, I'm privileged and honored to carry legislation this evening on the House floor for our park rangers to protect them when they're working outside the parks, helping local law enforcement. I think that's a big boost for our park rangers, their dedicated service. A couple of questions. First, I get asked this a lot in my community in Williamson County, and I blame it on all the folks driving through from Murray County, but any update on the emission testing coming from the federal government? I understand they have until August to give us an answer.
Yes, sir. You want me to handle this one, Commissioner? Okay. So to advise the committee Representative Whitson, we have been having a very good dialogue right now with the EPA, and we actually are scheduled this afternoon to have another call with the EPA regional administrator down in Atlanta. We got wind that the EPA headquarters was considering another step in the process. The last step, in fact, is publication of the rule that the Region 4 EPA has already approved, get that published in the Federal Register. When we got wind of that, we took some pretty good steps to make sure the folks at EPA headquarters know that this is something that Tennessee wanted, and we're able to advise them. We hear that was well received, so hopefully we will know more about it today. And that is something that we acknowledge that many members of this body have expressed interest in, and we will certainly be in touch with y'all and looking for help if we, as we may need that. So thank you for the question. Any other questions?
Yes, if you could just keep me updated on that, 'cause I do get a lot of questions from constituents on it. As you
Yes,
can
sir. We
imagine.
will, Representative Whitson.
And I might just add, that is not unique to Chairman Whitson. If you could just keep us all updated on that, those of us who have counties with that process in place, everyone thinks that because we passed that legislation a few years ago, they shouldn't have to get their emissions testing. And so you can just help us understand where we are in that process, so we know what to tell those angry constituents about why they still have to go back at least one more time.
Yes, ma'am. We should have something actually to report out this afternoon, and we will make sure to do that.
Thank you. Chairman Whitson.
Yes, and I have a card due in August for a test. So. Another question. Last year, the department requested $3.6 million in funding to help offset the reduced fee revenue for the non-Title V air pollution program, and 1.5 million of this was funded out of the 3.6 requested. This year, the department requested an additional 1.5 million for the same purpose, and that was not included in the budget. How much are operational expenses currently exceeding the fee revenue that you have or receive?
That's a good question. Right now, we thought it was important during this time of economic uncertainty, Representative Whitson, in our air program, not to propose either additional fee increases. We wanted really to try to remain a flat budget on the Bureau of Environment side. With that said, we have had to dip into our reserves a bit in order to sustain staffing and permitting as needed. That will not be sustainable. I don't know the exact numbers to give you. I can speak in generalities that we're looking at probably 2 to 3 years. We will likely need to ask for that $1.5 million again. So I think there was an acknowledgement by folks involved in that we needed the dollars, but when you're faced with a global pandemic, we thought it was the best time to dip into reserves to push the division forward in that regard.
And how
Chairman
much
Whitson.
do we have in our reserves right now, approximately?
I may need a little help on this one.
And if you don't have it now, you can send it to
Yes,
me.
sir. I'll follow
Share-
up with
share
you,
it the,
Representative.
committee. I appreciate it. And, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you mind if, I've got 3 or 4 questions. Do you mind if I ask them in a series? Thank you. Commissioners, I just appreciate all of you being here, and you and your staff in the administrative level have been extremely responsive to our requests and our suggestions over the last couple of years, and I really appreciate that. You're great to work with. It's making a real big difference for the citizens of our state, and I appreciate your willingness to look at problems and then tackle those problems. I'll just say that. And your liaisons do an excellent job getting us timely responses, getting us information, and that makes our jobs go much more smoothly, and you know, time is critical on so many things. There were some positions that are, I think, experiencing high turnover in the department, and I was wondering exactly what those positions are. If you can just, if there's a general category, and what are we doing? Maybe some of this is already addressed with the pay increases, but what type of things are we doing to retain employees?
Thank you, Representative. I can address this from a parks perspective at least. We see most of our turnover in lower paid positions, frankly. Our housekeepers, our people that are taking care of the park, our maintenance workers and those types of things. We talked a minute ago about some of the raises we were able to give those people. That's going to help them. It's not going to solve the problem, but that's going to help. We are also within our hospitality organization. We've done a restructuring of staff positions to be more competitive with the private sector, frankly, and that's also going to allow some higher salaries within that organization, and we believe that's going to significantly help our turnover issues, and which is critically important in hospitality. Well, it's in everything, because you can't provide the kind of service our citizens expect from our state parks and natural areas, and particularly our hotels and cabins and those kinds of places, unless we can retain people, good people to use them. So we're very appreciative of the monies that have been provided for that, and we're going to continue to work on that issue because retention is an important objective for us.
I appreciate that. I know a good bit of your staff and even across the state and field offices especially have been working from home or the beach or somewhere. What is that current status, and when do we anticipate them either getting back in the office or us seeing a significant supplemental budget reduction for leases that we no longer need? What's the current status of that?
Yeah, we are looking at alternative work solutions very seriously, and we're probably looking at I don't like to refer to it as the new normal, the next normal, coming out of this. Right now, I feel like we're on a work from home on steroids program. So it's going to look quite a bit different, but we're anticipating somewhere in 25 to 30% reduction in footprint, which is a huge savings. And there was some reluctance from a number of our staff. I would say, managers, how will this work? But most of our programs, and I noted earlier our septic system permitting, we went up 50% in request, and yet we were able to bring down the time to turn those around. A lot of that's technology based. So I think that you'll probably, we built a little bit of that into our budget this time, but nothing significant. But I think in about 2 years, you're going to see a big impact. And we're really trying to time that so the IT modernization and the space reduction all comes together.
Okay, thank you for that. And I would just encourage, as I know you will, because I know you personally, to build in the accountability. If there's been some bumps along the road with the work from home that I'm hearing are experienced in the field with some of the permits that Chairman Williams even mentioned, that some delays in communication and whatnot, because the work from home is creating some bumps that need to be ironed out, and I'm sure y'all are on that.
That's certainly going to be a challenge, and I think we'll have to be very intentional about the accountability there. And I know some of the other departments have experienced a boost once they got to that place. But yes. we'll pay very close attention
Thank
to that.
you. And thank you, Madam Chair. One last question to ask, and this is just kind of late breaking news. I understand the U.S. DOJ has issued a CSOL operations order to TSMP. That's been the subject of a conversation around here for the last couple of years or more, and a fund that's sitting there with a lot of public dollars sitting in it that we don't really know now what's going to happen to it. So do you have any information about that and what impact we're likely to see from that?
As you noted, that letter is hot off the press. Greg, would you like to answer that?
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to. Thank you for the question. The letter came from the United States Army Corps of Engineers. It was essentially a cease and desist letter to terminate the entire Tennessee stream mitigation program in the state of Tennessee. It is our understanding that the Corps of Engineers and the Tennessee Stream Mitigation Program had been trying to negotiate a wind down memorandum of agreement. Ultimately, that did not happen. To your specific question on the funds, what we know from that letter is that the Corps of Engineers instructed the TSMP not to spend any of its money on any kind of administration, salaries, third-party professionals. Don't hire lawyers. I mean, they told them essentially freeze those accounts. And within 48 hours of that letter, the TSMP was supposed to provide an accounting to the Corps of Engineers, not disgorge the funds yet, but provide an accounting to the Corps of Engineers of the amounts in those funds. It is our understanding, based on that letter, that the Corps would specify a nonprofit entity that we would expect. What my understanding is that nonprofit entity would then hold those funds in escrow, if you will, to allow other parties to try to present mitigation projects, restoring streams, restoring wetlands, things like that, that could then be done in the state. I'm sorry, I don't have any more specifics about who that nonprofit entity is, but that is our understanding of the process sitting here today.
Representative Lamar.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Hey, I wanted to inquiry about an issue that's going on in my district with the Byhalia pipeline. I wanted to know the department's official opinion on this particular project that's going on and how you think that we should respond as well. And then my second question is, I know that we get the WIN grants for lead testing, and you issue those WIN grants out for the testing. However, there's not many funds for remediation. Can you tell me, is there efforts to create a fund to help school districts who find bad lead sources in their schools, to give them some sort of support to remediate that lead source?
Greg?
Commissioner, yes, I'll try to answer this as best I can. I wanted to make sure I was making notes on the question. Efforts to create funding was the second one on the WIN grant. Okay. First, the Byhalia pipeline. That, as we understand that is regulated by the FERC. And so our permitting authority is somewhat limited. We would be permitting the aquatic resource impacts. And I'm going to phone a friend real quick and ask do we know the status? We have issued all of the aquatic resource alteration permits that our department is responsible for. We understand that the process is proceeding towards acquiring easements from landholders at this stage. We've also heard concerns, and we recognize the concerns that we are hearing about potential impacts to the Memphis Sands Aquifer, because that is a hugely important, valuable resource. What we know at this stage, and I'm looking to my experts to make sure I don't get out of line here, is that it would be shallow trenching that would not impact that aquifer. So I'm seeing some nodding back there. I don't think I'm far afield there, but we are well aware of the significant local opposition, and if there's further dialogue that within our scope of authority that we can take comments from folks, certainly happy to do that. As far as suggestions, given that it is a FERC regulated, and I guess this is Greg Young speaking. If it's a FERC regulated thing, it seems like, that would probably be a really good forum to express those concerns. You want me to answer the wind grant?
Yeah, can you pause there for a second? I
Yes,
want to ask a
ma'am.
follow-up question.
Yes, ma'am,
My
please.
follow-up question is there a way to appeal the permits that you have approved or redact them with such strong outrage from both our federal officials, our state elected officials, and our local elected officials about our disapproval of the pipeline coming in the financial and economic impacts it can potentially have?
So the appeal rights would generally depend on the type of permit issued. If it is a general permit, if it's an individual permit, then specific individual permitting would be subject to appeal, okay? A general permit is something that the department, every 5 years, we go through a process, and at the time we list those general permits, that's something that folks can appeal at that time. If it is an individual permit, there are appeal rights associated with those individual permits. For some things that they call linear projects like road building, pipelines, things like that, where the aquatic resource impacts may be just routine, normal, run of course kind of thing. In those situations, those would be subject to general permit. I'm not entirely sure. Are these general permits? Yeah, these are individual permits, so there would be appeal rights associated with them.
So just to be clear, if I wanted to challenge the permit process for the pipeline, I could?
Assuming that the timeline hasn't passed, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And you can answer the wind grant question now. Thank you.
Just a moment on follow up on that.
Yes,
So
yes.
that appeals process, who has standing to make that appeal? Is that the general public? Who can go to court and say, I'm appealing this?
Yes, ma'am. So that would be an appeal usually it's before an administrative law judge, and that ultimately could make its way to our water board. To have standing, without giving you the lawyerly constitutional answer, the basic thing is you have to be an aggrieved person under our statute, okay? And you have to have submitted comments during the public commenting of that individual permit. That's a prong of standing. Then there's your normal constitutional standing of injury without getting into too much of the constitutional side.
Thank you, Representative Lamar. Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted that follow up. And I believe you had another question about funding.
Yes, ma'am. And can y'all, with that being said, after this, I would love for you to come talk to me
Yes, ma'am.
more in detail about that.
Yes, ma'am. I'll
But
be
go
happy
ahead to the
to.
next question. I won't take too much time on the pipeline.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. On the wind testing, I think your specific question related to efforts to create funding. I am not currently aware of that, but I will ask for phone a friend again. Would it be, do you
could
want
we
me to
have her
ask her
come-
to come
Yes,
up
if she
here,
could just
please,
Step forward
and introduce yourself.
yes, please.
I'm making
I'm
it
sorry, I
difficult for
didn't know
y'all
that
today.
off. I'm sorry, I didn't know that off the top of my head. I have to.
Yeah, sorry for speaking from the audience. My name is Paula Mitchell. I'm the Deputy Director of the Division Water Resources, the operations branch within the central office. The WIN grant, currently the funding is not available for remediation. Our focus is on testing and education and outreach. Through some of the testing, the results have, we've had lead hits on faucets or other devices or apparatuses that have been able to be taken offline without interruption. These have not been like drinking water fountains or in the cafeteria of schools. They've been mostly kind of in maintenance closets or sinks or showers that have been able to just be taken offline and not needed remediation. I think as we go through more testing and get more data and results, we'll have a better data set to estimate what remediation costs might need to be.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, I was pushing House Bill 46, which was dealing with the lead testing issue, and my colleague's biggest pushback was there was no funding, or you all are not doing remediation, so we shouldn't do anything else regarding lead. We just test and then there's nothing. So I'm just curious to figure out if there's something else we can do per the comments from my colleagues previously around your control over the lead testing and remediation. So I just wanted to put that out there as something I'm looking forward to bring into the budget as a step two to what we're already doing, because right now we're testing, but there's nothing after that. So, okay, the water's contaminated, now what? So I would love to entertain further conversations about how we can secure some more funding to take that to the next level to correct these problems across the state.
I think that's a good next step is to look at the data and then estimate how much funding might be needed for that.
And Representative Lamar, I would also add that I think given the way that all that is set up, that we would, Paul, I think we need to involve the Department of Health in those discussions as well. Is that correct?
And education as well.
And
Department of
education.
Thank you. And thank you, Deputy Commissioner, for joining us and not making us have to strain our ears. Next on my list, Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to say to our Deputy Commissioner over Environment, thank you very much. It's a unique balancing act that we have in the state of Tennessee, where we want to be responsive to business interests, but also respectful of our environment. So there's a current an ongoing tension that will always be there. And I appreciate the understanding that that there is a balance to have as we're working on issues.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you very much. If I could, the fun part of TDEC is our state parks. Deputy Commissioner Bryson, thank you for everything that you do, and I appreciate that. As we're looking at alternative work sites, I'm sure some of our state employees would love to be working out of our state parks. Maybe we'll put them in a little cubicle office with the window at our state parks and put them there. So that may be some opportunity at our 50-plus state park sites we have across. I do want to put, since I've got the microphone, I do want to put a plug in. We're going to put a statue of David Crockett on the Capitol grounds. And I'm going to mention this every time I get an opportunity. I think that a David Crockett trail across the state of Tennessee would be a win-win. I've mentioned that to several folks before, and I'm going to continue to mention that. It's a Department of Tourism issue, Department of Environment and Conservation that we can work through our state parks as well. So I think that may be the next logical trail to create across the state of Tennessee. David Crockett is an international hero, and I put that out there for any comments that you may have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Representative Hawk. And you represent my wife's home county, so it's always special to have a conversation with you. But so appreciate that. We are it's something we can look into, and I also appreciate the fact that you said David Crockett. One thing I have learned in this is that Davy Crockett was the guy from Disney, and David Crockett is the Tennessean that served our state so well. So thank you for that, and thank you for the innovative thinking about how we can improve our parks and how we can improve the experience that people have with the outdoors. And we really appreciate that, and we'll keep it under consideration.
Great. Thank you. I have no more questions on my list, so I'll ask mine. In the budget, there's 871,000 recurring dollars. That's to cover proposed legislation to obtain primacy over surface coal mining regulation. Can you just help us understand how that legislation is going to increase the expenses for the department, what that money is going to be utilized for?
Yes, ma'am. Deputy Commissioner Young here. I'll take that. Thank you, Chairman. So I can answer the question directly as far as what the money will go to. I think that's what you're asking. That will go to the needed staff and personnel and equipment in order to carry out the new program that we would be bringing on. Currently, the federal government does it with between 22 and 25 people, I want to say, for our state. We're going to do it with 16. Okay. We feel good about what we can do to be more efficient and to bring those people on. And so that's really what the money is needed for, is the equipment and the personnel to do what the federal government does with 20-something people. We can do it with less. But we're going to do it right, and we're going to do it good. If I may, can I give a little bit more background there? So when we looked at trying to implement this program and take over from the federal government per the instructions of the General Assembly, we did some pretty extensive financial analysis of what it would take. Part of being able to take over a federal program is showing that you have the financial wherewithal to do it. And so we need to, in order to carry out the directive to obtain delegation primacy, we need to be able to show the feds that, yes, we've got the ability to do it. And so we did some extensive cost analysis and some extensive research to figure out what that would take. And that's how we arrived at the 871,000 figure. It's an ongoing process. We will need to revise that legislation because in addition to the financial wherewithal, you have to have the legal and regulatory wherewithal. And so we needed to, after discussions with the federal government about obtaining primacy, we also realized that that is the terms of the statute and our program would need to be revised as well. So that is legislation that the administration is putting forward to the General Assembly this year. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and hopefully that is going to result in the jobs and the economic development that the legislation was originally intended to support. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask about, could you give us an update on Meeman Forest, the boat deck there? We had appropriated monies for that, and I think we was going to try to name it after former Representative Ron Lawler. If you all could give an update on that or have any information.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm going to have to get back with you on the update, get you an update so we know exactly where we are at this point. I have not heard about that in a little while, as I guess you have not. So let me get you an update and get back to you after this meeting, if that's okay.
It's okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, again, we thank you for joining us today. And as I think was Chairman Hawk mentioned, the state parks is the fun part of your department. And I know that they've risen to the challenge this year as more Tennesseans have headed outdoors with the restrictions on indoor activities. And I know that in some of the parks in my area, we actually had to have rangers separating people because the great outdoors wasn't that great in terms of space for the people that were attempting to use it. So again, and I certainly hope that I know the people that I've talked to that have participated in the parks have used those this year have been really impressed with the experience. And I think many of them will plan to go back even when COVID goes away and they have other options to choose from. So I think that was it may be the most positive thing that happened out of this whole pandemic. But thank you and your department for all of the things that you do, from regulating our pollution and all those other things to the fun stuff at the parks. And we appreciate your work. We are going to take a short break while we have the sanitation process. And I would announce that for those of you who have done your due diligence, have hung in here, we have another couple of hearings to go, but this will be our last Monday of these hearings, and there will be pizza delivered. Again, you have to be present to win. You have to, pizza will be available once we finish with our next hearing. So in the conference room in the back.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you, Madam
And
Chairman.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, that you all were here. You're too early for the pizza. It's not here yet.
That sounds like the fun part of your job.
Doing good. I'm happy to be here.
news about like for small businesses and just kind of small businesses in terms of like that 50 right on the street. This is just dirt.
I'm out of the judges. I'm out of the. Time's up. Okay.
In the interest of Mr. Hatcher, thank you for being here today, and don't let the fact that you're standing between this group and pizza intimidate you at all. But we do, thanks for joining us, and we would, as we've asked all of our presenters, hopefully your presentation was within 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have opportunity for questions from this committee who are, as you probably know from watching, they're not shy at all. So if you would like to proceed.
Well, good morning. How am I coming through there? You hear me? All right. Good to see everybody. And I heard about the pizza, and I'm glad I'm glad to hear about that, because that's going to take a lot of cheese off the market. You know, that's a good way to. Thanks for having us today. We're excited about going over the proposed budget with you. I have with me today Deputy Commissioner Tom Womack, Assistant Commissioner and Chief Financial Officer Shannon Klanowski, and we have a backup to the backup, Phelps, and we're glad to have him for any down in the weeds forestry questions, because half of our department is forestry. Just some brief comments to start with. The ag and forestry industries are the largest, and in my mind, the most important industries in the state, because they provide food and fiber, and in some cases, fuel to Tennesseans. And as the pandemic's been pretty tough on the industries, and had some impact along the way. With the Department of Agriculture, we're uniquely qualified to deal with emergencies through our experiences with animal disease, and also with our wildfire fighting capabilities. And so we're accustomed to that. Despite that, the challenges of the pandemic were numerous, and we're still dealing with some of that. So as we move forward, we've got a few slides, and I'll go over these. And if you've got questions, you can stop me along the way, or we can answer them at the end. Yeah. So we were fortunate in Tennessee to have support of the governor with use of CARES money to $55 million for ag and forestry businesses that had experienced losses due to COVID or disruptions in the supply chain for whatever reason. And we felt like this Corona Ag and Forestry Business Fund is one of the best in the country, because it was a targeted approach and targeted at those businesses that hadn't received much, if any, money from the federal government to that point. And you can see the breakdown here of the $55 million. And to date, we're a little bit over 60% of that has been allocated, or the checks in the mail, and we're working through as rapidly as we can the remaining. But if you look at this, part of the focus and part of a big part of it, and I think it's about 20% or so, was for meat processors to increase our meat processing capacity in the state. We noticed during the pandemic we had a disruption, or close to a disruption, in backlog of livestock ready for harvest in the state. And so we felt like there was a need to increase the meat processing capacity. And then you've got $4.5 million for food processors. USDA's programs did not address the forestry industry at all, so we thought it was important to include that. And so you can see for forestry sawmills and forestry loggers, nearly, $11 million or so. And then there were some local products and breweries included as well as county fairs. Next slide. Now, this is what part of what we mean by we're uniquely qualified. So the forestry division for a few years have been doing some out-of-state deployments in support of mostly western states that have been dealing with fighting wildfires. And through that, you can see that it's a good income revenue generator for the state, as well as you can see there's a 100% increase in revenue from 2019 to 2020, which is a good thing. Anytime you have a division that can bring some revenue in, it's good for the taxpayers. And then we had a 500% increase in personnel deployments, and that was on purpose, as well as a 400% increase in equipment deployments. And so these states reimburse us, or the federal government does, for these deployments, and it also helps us in our readiness to fight wildfires here while maintaining the equipment in good working order, and our folks are trained up and ready all the time. Next slide, please. So a big part of our necessary services to the state is laboratory testing for livestock diseases. The pandemic really raised the awareness because the pandemic itself, most people think, came from animals. So we have been increasing our viral testing for certain diseases. You can see chronic wasting disease, that Tennessee has become the epicenter of the country on chronic wasting disease. And so we weren't equipped to do any chronic wasting disease testing at our state lab previously, and now you can see where we've gone to 3,200 tests in 2020, and now we're doing, I think last I saw, nearly 1,000 or up to 1,000 tests a week in support of TWRA. And then you can see the increase in Seneca Valley and foot and mouth disease virus testing also there from 2019 over 2020. And that's significant because those two viruses, foot and mouth disease and Seneca Valley virus disease, look identical, and foot and mouth disease is a foreign animal disease. And so it was important that we were able to test for both of those within a few hours at our state lab, not to hold up commerce. Next slide. So this is for year 21 vacancy reductions. I'm not going to read through this line, but you can see a listing of where those reductions came from and the total savings of around $500,000. Next slide. This shows the savings for our reduction plans. 701,000 revenue offset, 677,000 to match actual expenditures. The forestry division, it's over half our staffing in the department, $1,244,000. Our consumer and industry services maintenance agreement savings of $102,800. Business development advertisement savings of $136,800. And then when Governor Lee became governor, he increased the amount that FFA and 4-H foundations got from $250,000 to $300,000, and so this $100,000 was a reduction back to the previous level. Next slide. So there was also further savings on of $76,500 on the dozer fund, and animal health technicians 2 full-time equivalents, $155,000. for a total savings of $3,195,300. Next slide. This is a summary of the proposed cost increases. The governor is proposing $5.5 million for the highly successful Ag Enhancement Program. We feel like that's one of our most effective tools for rural communities and also for rural economic development and ag and forestry business development. The state fair grant of $5,250,000 for possible standing up of the Wilson County Fair site to be the Tennessee State Fair. And then an increase of $242,000 for the One Health Initiative, which is really support of increased viral testing that may be the viruses that tend to be zoonotic between human and animals. Forestry software, $305,200, and then three previously approved positions for chronic wasting disease, 3 positions there for a total down there at the bottom for the state would be $11,297,200. Next slide. And that is it for the formal presentation. So open it up to questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. And again, COVID and this pandemic has been a challenge for everyone, but as you mentioned, no more so than the folks that are served by your department. And when you go to the grocery store and you see shelves where normally they're filled with meat and there's nothing. I went to the grocery store one night and I'm like, oh, did you put it all away? Am I too late? And they're like, lady, that's all there is. So it's a very different kind of situation than we were accustomed to. And I know that there were a lot of challenges with livestock and produce and milk and all sorts of things that we had problems getting from the producer to the consumer. And thank you for helping work through that and making those, I guess, the implications of that to minimize those. So we do appreciate it. Chairman Zachary, you're first on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioner. And just to echo Chair Lady's comments, thank you to you and your team. I think you have probably taken on a more significant importance in our state over the last year. So thank you to you for all that you've done. Question about the Ag and Forestry Business Fund. You referenced it in your first slide. So you answered most of my questions. Really, the only question I have related to that, the $55 million you received, you've spent roughly $14 million of that. Will you be able to use the rest of that money before the deadline in June?
Well, it's been kind of a long process because the Treasury Department originally, they kind of changed the rules on us. And then we got an extension on the deadline. So originally we were going to have to be done with all those projects before the end of last year. And we've got an extension through the end of May. So we think so. Those that can provide the documentations that's necessary from the guidelines that we're following. And we're looking as we get closer and closer to that, because we've already allocated over 60%. If there's some portion of that left over, we're gonna ask for a way to reallocate it, and we'll go through the Fiscal Stimulus Accountability Group and the governor's office to see what we can do there. But we don't plan on sending any money back.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. My question has to do with on question C, 3C of the questionnaire. It tells that you've had $960,000 that was unspent on the Forestry Legacy Program. What is this program and why was that money not used?
Okay, Tim, it's a good thing that you're here so you can address that.
Thanks, Commissioner. The Forest Legacy Program.
If you would just identify yourself for the record, please.
Sure. Tim Phelps, Tennessee Division of Forestry Communications and Outreach Unit Leader. The Forest Legacy Program is a program that we facilitate through the U.S. Forest Service. It is a program designed to encourage conservation of private lands that are immediately adjacent to public lands. So the priorities of those properties would be to basically extend the conservation efforts that are occurring on the public lands and extending them to the private lands. Each year, we facilitate a number of project proposals that come forth to examine to see if they fit the needs for those conservation purposes and the private property owners' objectives with that property. The $960,000 that you referenced, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with why some monies are not spent in any given year, but many times the facilitation of any given project to work it through from start to finish is a multi-year project. So it could be that that's sitting on the table because we're still finishing the deal, working to close it out as either a fee simple or a conservation easement type program, or looking at it for future projects.
Yeah, we can find out specifically and get back to you too, if we need to.
Representative Sexton.
That's what I was going to ask, if you could send it to our chair lady and then let her send it to us. And I do have another question. The forestry industry has been hit really hard, and as you know, lumber has taken a 300% and 400% increase in price. Just for instance, plywood has gone from $20 a sheet, 3/4 inch, to last week it was $45. It's projected to go to $100. This is destroying the housing industry as well as the industry that I'm in, which is the furniture manufacturing. So if something doesn't offset this soon, first of all, I'm not sure why that we're seeing the increase. And second of all, if something doesn't happen soon, it's going to destroy several businesses, just going to put us out of business. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's probably going to adjust pretty soon, but I'll also pass that to Tim.
Of course, one of the things we look at with our role is encouraging some of that money to get down to the private forest landowner who owns 80% of the forest property in the state of Tennessee. That's the raw source, that's the raw material that's making that. Unfortunately, a lot of those price increases that some are benefiting from don't necessarily make it down to that private landowner. That in part is supply and demand. There's a huge demand for a lot of that product, and honestly, an oversupply, especially on the softwood market. 10, 20, 30 years or so ago, a lot of folks were planting pine. Now that market is unfortunately saturated, but there's still a very high demand for it. So we hope we can encourage markets to take other approaches, not just in the pulpwood and the saw timber that's coming out of especially that pine market, but biomass, carbon sequestration, other markets that could potentially get some of that money to the landowner.
More questions?
Representative Sexton.
So I'm not sure that you answered the question about why the price. Are you saying that it's just the supply and demand that's driving the price?
I think we're seeing a lot of that, yes.
Okay. I'm not completely sure that I agree with that, but I don't have the information that you do, but I would, be interested in seeing if we could look into this further, because it's really having a devastating impact on several industries. Thank
Sure.
you.
I think we can look with our partners with the Tennessee Forestry Association, get some input from them, and see what their projections are moving forward.
Thank you. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. This has to do with the 4-H and FHA reductions. The budget includes a reduction of about $100,000 for grants to 4-H and FFA. Last year's budget added about $600,000 in recurring grants for these programs. Why is it being reduced this year, and is it being split equally among those two?
Well, the thinking was, and so when Bill Lee became governor, he increased it. They were getting allocated $250,000 a piece prior to him becoming governor. He increased that to $300,000, and the thinking was to go ahead and reduce that back. At that point, we're looking at anything we could we could look at a possible reduction without impacting those associations too much. And so we thought it would be fair enough to reduce those back to the original of 250 each. So the 50 each gets you to the 100,000. Go ahead, Tom.
Proceed. Yes, go ahead.
Madam Chairman, may I be recognized? I think I'm on now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Your name, please, and title.
Tom Womack, Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Agriculture, and I'm a product of the FFA and 4-H both, so they're near and dear to my heart. So the Commissioner's correct. We were just simply looking at equitable reductions across the board in our department that we can make there. But I wanted to share with you that we also provide some direct program support to 4-H and FFA, $55,000 each from the AgTag, Agricultural License Plate Program. So combined with that and the money that we typically send to the foundations each for their endowment, they're still receiving a little over $300,000 each.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Commissioner, I heard you talking about the meat processing, and in my community, I met with our county commissioners last week, and they expressed how, because we have a lot of cattle in my community, and they expressed how there is a year waiting time. One of the county commissioners had a year waiting time just to process her cattle. And she said to me, you know what I would love? And I said, what? And she said, I would love if our TCAT here in Lebanon taught meat processing. And I thought about it and I said, golly, how does one learn to become a meat processor? Do you just gain employment at a processing plant? Is it from your family teaching you skills? They are very good paying jobs. And would it be a benefit, or is there some place where someone has a formal education in processing?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. So it's part of our workforce development efforts. I can tell you already there are 1 or 2 high schools that are doing meat cutting training already. There are some junior colleges that have started it. There's one in East Tennessee. I can't call which university it is. And it's also on UT's radar to include that, because we desperately need those, because one of the biggest issues for these meat processors is labor, as it is for almost any business. And so we're working on that. We see the value to it, and I think you're going to see more and more programs come up.
I have another question to ask you, but I wanted to add, the county commission, the Wilson County Commission, actually passed a resolution. So if they haven't passed it on to you, I'll pass it on to you to hopefully gain your support to have a processing school or certificate at our TCAT. We just would love that. My next question is about the proposed $5 million, $5.25 million funding in the state budget for the state fair. And what do we expect with that? I know that Wilson County was selected as an excellent site for that, and the Wilson County Promotions is going to be taking a vote if they hadn't already. I met with them.
I think it's Thursday night.
Thursday night, right? They'll be taking a vote. And what do you expect that $5.25 million will be used for?
Well, the $5 million is proposed to be used for infrastructure at the Wilson County Fairgrounds, and the $250,000 would be for operation of the state fair by Wilson County Promotions.
Very good. And then the $250,000 is recurring in the state budget. Is that what the state fair, when it was in Nashville, is that what they received as well? Or
no, historically, most years the department had granted about 75,000 to the state fair. The year before the pandemic, they requested 150,000, and we did that, or they didn't think they could host a fair, and so about 75,000 a year until the year before the pandemic.
Well, Commissioner, I am thrilled to see this money in the budget, and I'll tell you, Wilson County Fair is one of the best fairs in the state, and I really think we'll make Tennessee proud if we go on to do that. So thank you.
The plan would be, we want that to be one of the top 5 state fairs in the country, and with agriculture, the number one industry, the state needs it for an educational side too, because that's, some Tennesseans, the only glimpse of agriculture they see is at a state fair.
Commissioner, just to follow up on that, so we've been spending 75 to 150,000 for the Nashville State Fair. Can you speak to the need for the very significant increase to 250,000 on a recurring basis if the fair is in Wilson County?
Yeah, so that number wasn't just, there was a proposed budget that Wilson County Promotions prepared, and that would be, their expenses would actually be closer to 400,000 just to cover what they think is necessary to hold a robust state fair. So that's premiums and judge expenses and awards, and it totals up to a pretty significant amount.
All right, thank you. Well, obviously, if we want to make this sort of investment, then as you mentioned, we would hope that we would definitely be in the top 5 in state fairs across the nation. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a question about radio replacements, and this is, I'm going to wrap several of these or 2 or 3 points here into one question if I can. There's over $1.25 million, or around $1.25 million of non-recurring for radio replacement. I'm assuming this is upgrading to digital radios. That's a lot of folks are having to do that, and you can touch on that. How old are the radios being replaced, and how long do you anticipate new radios lasting? And also, how many radios are going to be purchased with this?
Okay, I'll make a few comments and I'll pass it to Tim if that's okay. So this is something we've been working on for a while. So our Division of Forestry has their own communication system for the hills and hollows across these rural counties. We took a hard look at seeing if we could mesh that with the statewide system, and we found out the cost was going to be 4 or 5 times more than what it was for us to look at updating our system. And also, we wouldn't get the coverage that we're getting now, because some of these locations that they fight these fires are on the remote parts of the county and the state, and they're on the side of a hill. And it's critical that we're able to have that communication, which we already have in place. And so what we came up with is this radio replacement that we need. He can address how many that is, and then how old the old radios are. But we did take a look at see if we could mesh it with the statewide network, and it was way more expensive, and it wouldn't get as good a coverage, because we had that question by Commissioner Ely as well. So go ahead, Tim, and further address that.
Yeah, again, Tim Phelps, Division of Forestry. So we'll get to you on the exact number, but the commissioner is correct that there's really 3 components to our keeping the current systems that we have versus going to what's called the TACAN system. That is that we work in a very rural, rugged terrain. Some of that has to do not only with the topography, but also the distance which signals can carry. Now, while the TACAN system can hold more bandwidth on its frequencies, ours can travel longer and through the hollers and the hills, so to speak. So that's key point number 1. Key point number 2 is that the systems that we currently have and invested in over the past several decades currently lines up with the same systems that's used on a national level. So when our folks go out and are deployed, and you see the significant increase that we had with deployments over this past year, 162 personnel, 25 pieces of equipment, over 11 states, they all use the same system that we're adjusting to and have trained on over the years. So when we go out to Montana, when we go out to Idaho, even Florida and some of the other states, when we get there, our systems work in tandem with theirs. Conversely, when we have active fire seasons, which fortunately we don't have too many of, but something like 2016, when we bring people in to help with us, again, they can easily integrate into our systems. So the deployment issue is a big part of it. And the third piece is the fact that we have invested millions over the years with keeping this current system upgraded. We've got a fantastic staff on board that keeps up with the current equipment that we have. Keeping the standard just keeps us in tandem with other states, as well as being able to continue in our current efforts with keeping communication strong across the state.
I appreciate the detail you've gone into in making the decisions about how to spend that money, and you answered a question that I had not asked, and that's integrating into the rest of the state system, as we have heard in these other budget hearings from departments the last several weeks. So I appreciate that level of detail and the decision-making process you've gone through. Thank you.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair-Lady Hazelwood. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming. I have an inquiry. Last year, real estate transfer tax, as you know, you guys get a little bit of money from there. I think it was $3.2 million was budgeted. You collected a little over 8 or 10, something like that. Now you've got a fund balance of a little over $10 million in real estate transfer tax. Is there are you expecting to see this growth continue, and what are some uses that you might have for this money?
Well, it's a trend we've been seeing for a couple of years now, and it's every month there seems to set a new record on real estate transfer tax, and that's, I guess, part of the supply demand issue on the forestry products. But that money, I think, is by statute for soil conservation efforts, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a staff dedicated to that, and the demand for that by the farmers and ranchers across the state is off the chart. So we've got plenty of use for the money, and so we can adapt to further increases. But I would say it's probably peaked out. Shannon, you can give some numbers too.
Hi, I'm Shannon Klinowski. I'm with the Department. I'm Assistant Commissioner. We use that money. We are seeing, like the Commissioner said, record highs with the real estate market being so strong right now. So we take that money and we go out to the counties at the county level, work through their soil conservation district offices, and their landowners, doesn't necessarily have to be a farmer, just has to be a landowner, come forward with projects. A lot of them are related to water quality, erosion issues, things like that. And they come forward with projects and they work through us and we get those funded. The great news is we have probably more projects out there than we are able to fund. So the more money that rolls in, the more we can get projects accomplished across the state.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. What is the average project size for something like that if someone were to do it? I think one of my local communities did something as it relates to well water or something like that. I guess the perception is that these are all huge projects, but they may or may not be.
They are and they aren't.
Yeah.
We do some smaller projects where you can be talking, a couple $1,000s. We do some larger projects where you're talking $100,000 or more. It just depends on what the project is and the size of the project.
Okay.
Chairman Williams.
One follow-up, Commissioner. I want to congratulate you and your staff. I do know that it's my understanding that you know a guy. And I was wondering if there's any way that we could get some quality chocolate milk here in the Cordell Hull building. I understand that you even know a guy that might be able to get us some Jumpin' Jimmy, which would be great. If you know a guy, I'd really appreciate your assistance. It's hard to keep chocolate milk in the Cordell Hull building.
If I would have known that, I could have brought some.
Thank you. I look forward to your work in that area. Thanks.
Commissioner, it's never too late for chocolate milk. We'll just
It
make
goes
that
well
better.
with pizza too.
Well, maybe not today, but other days. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I've got about 3 quick questions, if I could get your permission. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here and appreciate what you do. You mentioned in your presentation about the reduction of the 1,244,000 that deals with the 22 full-time employees and some seasonal positions and so forth. How is that going to affect your department as a whole?
Well, we had discussions and angst and talked and talked and talked. But in the end, I told them, I said, we're not going to make any cuts that's going to affect our services and especially our emergency response and our readiness efforts. And so we felt like we accomplished that. It's not going to have any effect on our customer service or our readiness for emergencies. And a lot of those positions were seasonal. They weren't filled. And we felt like we didn't have to have those. And Tim could address, and many of them were forestry positions. And so you can add to that quickly, maybe, Tim?
Yeah, many of the seasonal positions were burn permit writers. We issue anywhere from 350 to 400,000 burn permits per year in rural communities, or actually rural areas outside of communities across the state. And many of those come in to take phone calls to issue those permits. We are working to divert a lot of that traffic to an online system that we developed a couple of years ago, burnsafetn.org. And that system is easy. It's very efficient. It is accessible 7 days a week, and you can get a permit within about 2 minutes if we are issuing permits that day. So we've got a campaign that's going on that's trying to work to encourage people to stop calling and use the online system.
Okay. And my lead-up question to that is, I know you touch the lives of every Tennessean every day in many ways. Do you feel that there are enough young people applying or preparing themselves to go into the Department of Ag and what you do? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a issue in all of agriculture about the increased age of farmers and diversity and inclusion, and so it's an issue. So it's part of our thought process to try to. We're going to be launching a beginning farmers program this very next ag enhancement cycle. We're going to start and leverage a mentorship program as well. And we're going to include a urban agriculture component. Okay. And it's our intent to try to be as diverse and inclusive as we possibly can. And those are all going to be new programs coming out.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that because I think that'd be great. My final question is with the chronic waste situation, I guess you bought the furnace. Y'all got the deal now.
We have an incinerator at our lab there and have had it for some time because that's the way we dispose of animals.
So you still don't have one out in the field?
No, so TWRA has been working toward purchasing an incinerator, and they can give you the details on where they are on that. Okay. But we're working a monthly, Commissioner Sawyers and Director Bobby Wilson of TWRA and I meet. And we've been talking about preparations for the next hunting season, especially related to disposal of deer carcasses, because it's going to be an issue again.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you very much, and your whole team. Brag on Carol McDonald for the work that she does, so thank you very much. I want to expound on the issue that the chair lady from Wilson County had discussed earlier, the state fair and the investment we're looking at making there. I understand the request. We have 56 other fairs across the state of Tennessee, small, medium, large, regional fairs that are struggling and have struggled because they've not been able to have their fair last year. And I would request of the Department of Agriculture that we look at in the supplemental budget request, that we look at matching that same $5 million with another $5 million that could be distributed on a grant basis to the other 56 fairs across the state of Tennessee. I know as we're looking to invest capital maintenance monies, that we've got some one-time dollars out there in different areas. If there's any way that we can do that, it would be greatly appreciated. There's a phone call that's going to be held later this week. Some of you may be on that call coming up with some of the executive committee of the fair boards across the state of Tennessee, that they're in desperate straits in many regards. There is some opportunities that I would like to see us, and I've given a dollar figure. If it's more, that's great. I would love to see that. But there's really some opportunities that we have to continue ag education, and I think this goes hand in glove with what we've got to do. You mentioned agriculture is our number one industry in the state of Tennessee. Tourism is the number two industry in the state of Tennessee, and that goes hand in glove once again with what we're trying to do with our fairs, in addition to the education investments that we make. So I put that out there to you as a request in order to help you get the monies for the state fair. It may be beneficial to help our 56 other local regional fairs as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I comment on that?
Commissioner, go ahead.
Yeah, so we realize that because we want to have strong county fairs, and those county fairs lead to the culmination of a strong state fair, and that's what we're after. We work hand in hand with the Fair Association, and we realize the desperate need because some of them, they still had the expenses and the maintenance all the way through the pandemic. And so that's why we included them in the CARES money. And actually the proposal that they came up with, I think our funding exceeded what they had proposed within the CARES money. So at least they're getting some. I think it was close to $3 million, I think was what they could have gotten if they applied for it. But I agree with you. I mean, and even in our other, what little bit of money we have, a lot of times we work with the counties to help them, and they can do more with less than anybody I've ever seen. They can take $75,000 for a pavilion for their county fair site and do it all themselves and end up with $1 million facility. So we're aware of it and working with them the best we can with what little bit of money we have. But if you can send us some more money our way for it, more power to you.
Briefly, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it helps when you ask for it. So if we could get something in that supplemental appropriations request, we'll see what we can do. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Commissioner and team.
Representative Lynn, I believe you had a follow-up question.
I did actually. It was a statement about the fair. I was thinking there's people probably watching online and they might not understand how it works. But if the state fair does move to Wilson County, the $5 million is to help with infrastructure because there's parking issues, facilities issues. We expect a lot more people to be at the fairgrounds. And right now parking or cars do back up onto feeder roads tremendously. And so it's just to help the facility be able to better control the masses of people and whatnot. Wilson County Promotions is a private nonprofit organization that operates the Wilson County Fair, and they operate the Wilson County Fair at the Wilson County Fairgrounds. And so the two are unaffiliated. Wilson County Promotions is not getting that money. It's the Wilson County Fair that will get that structural improvement. I'm sorry, the Wilson County Fairgrounds that will get that structural improvement money to be able to help with the masses of people that would be coming to the fair. But Wilson County Promotions, as the commissioner and I discussed, will be taking a vote on whether their organization would like to give up being the Wilson County Fair and take on being the Tennessee State Fair. And it's a big question for a lot of them. It's a very emotional question for a lot of the people in the county. I think Senator Pody, Representative White, and I have heard from all sides, many sides of people who are afraid about losing our identity. But there's also people who really believe that Wilson County could make Tennessee proud and really hold an excellent state fair that would be the envy of the nation. So that's where that is. So Wilson County Promotions is a private nonprofit, and the fairgrounds is owned by the county. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lynn, for clarifying that for those who might be, as you say, watching online or listening in. Commissioner, we thank you and your team, and it's already been mentioned already, but Carol McDonald does an outstanding job for your department up here. She's so well respected by everyone that I know. So you probably need to give her a raise. I'm just saying. But we do thank you again for the work that's done across the state every day. Tennessee's changing. We see that. We look out the windows here around Nashville and we see the cranes. I see the changes in my community, but agriculture remains the #1 industry in the state. We're very blessed to have other industries who are, auto industry, lots of manufacturing, but agriculture remains our #1 industry. And we thank you for providing the support. I grew up on a family farm. It's tough work. It's never ending work. And there are so many things out of your control in terms of weather and all those things that impact your outcomes. So thank you again for taking care of our Tennessee farmers through 4-H, through all kinds of methodologies. We're hopeful that we'll be raising up a new generation of farmers to take over for those of us who are getting old and tired. But thank you again, and we appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We're now back in session. Are there any announcements or unfinished business? We have one piece of unfinished business. The pizza is in the conference room waiting for you. So go enjoy, and thank you again for your attention and time today.